Welcome back, everyone. Well, in a couple of weeks, it's going to be the 190th anniversary of the Alamo. Most Americans are at least vaguely familiar. Most Texans are intimately familiar with the Alamo. I've visited the Alamo. There's not a lot to see that's left at this point of the original fortress structure, compound, I guess you would call it. But it's certainly an event, a siege that has gone down in history. And our friends at Battle Guide have taken a look to tell the story of the Alamo. I love the way they tell a story, the unique way that they present it to us using maps and drone footage and images and all sorts of things like that. So I'm excited to see what they do with this. And it's also an opportunity for me to just introduce some of you for the first time to Battle Guide. It's one of the most unique channels on this platform, and I think they do a fantastic job covering a variety of conflicts. They do stuff from the Zulu War. They've got a lot of World War I and World War II stuff. You name it, they've probably covered it at least once with their unique style. So I'll put the link in the description. Definitely check them out if you like what you see. Let's dive into the Battle of the Alamo.
Shortly before dawn on the 6th of March 1836, within the walls of a crumbling Spanish mission in the Mexican province of Texas, a ragtag bunch of 200 men found themselves surrounded, outnumbered by nearly 10 to 1. Moments later, a bugle call signaled the start of an attack that promised no mercy.
So just one thing right off the bat, a lot of people when they think of the Alamo, they think of this building right here, which is the chapel. And that's really about all that's left of it when you go to San Antonio today, because where the Alamo was is now right in the center of San Antonio. There's a street here with shops and things like that. None of the rest of this complex really remains.
By sunrise, every defender lay dead.
Notice he said by sunrise, because one of the things that the John Wayne version gets very wrong is they have it happening in the middle of the day. Whereas the one that has Billy Bob Thornton in it and those guys, I think Ron Howard made that one, correctly shows the attack happening before the sun comes up.
But does the story that we know of that fight match what actually took place? In this video, we'll examine historic records, eyewitness accounts, and detail brick-by-brick 3D reconstruction to uncover the real events behind the actions that history remembers as the Battle of the Alamo. To get there, we need to go back to 1835, when tensions between the Mexican government and American settlers in Texas had finally boiled over.
And yeah, to understand all of this, remember, first of all, Mexico has only been an independent nation itself for maybe a decade at this point, fully independent from Spain. And so what you have is this state of Texas, which is part of Mexico, as kind of this buffer. Imagine Poland in 1939, right, between the Soviet Union and Germany. What you have here is this kind of buffer region between, only it's part of Mexico rather than independent, between the U.S. and Mexico. And the U.S. is all about manifest destiny. And so you've got all these people wanting to go west anyway, and a lot of them are going into Texas. And a lot of them are bringing, like the ones from the South, they're bringing their property with them, which includes for them enslaved human beings, where it's illegal under the Mexican Constitution for slavery. So that's all going to become kind of a flashpoint for this.
To open conflict. Over a decade earlier, following independence from Spain, Mexico had invited American settlers to populate and develop the sparsely inhabited region, hoping they would serve as a buffer against Native American raids.
Yeah.
Families and
Americans, you come in and, we don't want Mexicans to have to deal with it. So Americans, you kind of fill this area so we don't have to deal with the Native Americans.
Frontiersmen arrived in droves, and by 1835, over 30,000 Americans lived in Texas, outnumbering their Mexican neighbors by more than 3 to 1. But when the Mexican government tried imposing centralized policies and abolishing state autonomy, discontent spread, and by 1835, the Texas Revolution had begun.
So here's where Mexico went wrong. And to use an analogy that I've experienced myself, I was once part of a church that was only a couple of decades old. And the church had been founded by a group of people who had broken off from another church because they were unhappy, because there were differences in doctrine, a number of reasons why, but they left and they started a new church, right? Well, it was only a matter of time before the new church went in a direction that some of those same people didn't like. And so what did they do? They left. You've got Americans. These are the children and grandchildren of the people who fought a war of independence to break away from the British. And now they're coming into Mexico, and you've got the Mexican government instituting policies they don't like. Oh, hey, you know what? Independence!
This triggered a mass mobilization of fighters, answering Texan Commander-in-Chief Sam Houston's call for volunteers, adventurers, patriots, and romantics.
And that's a great point, too. They literally go back to Tennessee, and they're like, hey, can you come? And one of the people that comes, I'm sure we're going to talk about, is Davy Crockett. David Crockett had been a congressman from Tennessee, and he gets voted out of office, and he very famously, or if he really said it, who knows, I think he probably did, said, you all can go to hell, I'm going to Texas.
From New Orleans came the New Orleans Greys.
Yep.
From Kentucky came Captain Duval's Mustangs, and from Alabama, the Red Rovers. Most notable was Davy Crockett, a 49-year-old frontiersman, soldier and politician, famed for his earthy storytelling, wilderness skills and coonskin cap. According to legend, he was a man who shot 47 bears in 1 month and rode alligators for exercise.
One of the things I love about the portrayal of Billy Bob Thornton as Davy Crockett is that you see a man who's just a man who's wrestling with the myth, the ethos of Davy Crockett, the larger-than-life person that these men think he is, when he knows he's not that guy, really.
When the Texan Revolution started, Crockett had just lost an election, famously telling his constituents that they could go to hell and that he would go to Texas. Already there was another towering figure, Jim Bowie, or Bowie. Feel free to continue the 200-year-long argument about how to pronounce that one in the comments.
I've always said Bowie.
Born in Kentucky and raised in Louisiana, Bowie was a land speculator, adventurer, and occasional outlaw. He gained fame in 1827 after the Sandbar fight, where despite being shot twice and stabbed multiple times, he killed an opponent with his large hunting knife, giving the Bowie knife its legendary name.
Do you ever see Crocodile Dundee, and there's the famous scene where a guy pulls a knife on him, and he's like, that's not a knife. And he pulls a big one out and he says, that's a knife. That's what the Bowie knife is. It's basically a small sword.
Bowie eventually moved to Texas, married into wealth, but tragedy struck in 1833 when he lost his wife and 2 infant children to cholera. Grief and drink led him to the Texas Revolution, where he served as a volunteer militia colonel.
This is a great point. There's so many different reasons why people come. Davy Crockett comes because he's looking for adventure and he's disgusted with Tennessee. Some people are coming because it's an opportunity for land. It's an opportunity for adventure. Some people are coming because they just need to start a new life because of bad stuff that happened that they want to ignore or that they need to get away from.
One of the key early successes for the Texians was here in the regional capital of San Antonio de Bejar. In December 1835, after a grueling siege, the Mexican force was defeated, giving the Texians control of San Antonio and a little-known nearby fort. Let's take a look. What is now known as the Alamo was a former Spanish mission complex built in the early 18th century just outside San Antonio. Over the last 300 years, San Antonio has massively expanded and today has swallowed up much of the site.
Right.
But by overlaying the footprint of the fort onto the modern satellite view, we can see where it once stood, a collection of ragged structures covering an area of 3 acres with
Now, I'm looking here for a second because I was there, 7, 8 years ago. And that looks like it's been opened up some since then. I don't remember this being that open. I think I need to go down to street level and take a look at this. Yeah, it looks like they're opening this up more. Like that there was not there when I was there the last time. Are they restoring it to what are they trying to rebuild much of the complex? That is awesome if so. Because honestly, when I was there, there's just not a lot to see. There's the chapel, and there's a little bit of the grounds around the chapel, but there's not a lot there. So if they're able to build that up and make it into more of a tourist attraction right there, because San Antonio is a great city. The Riverwalk's really cool. You can go to the site where they think maybe the ashes of the Alamo defenders were burned and then possibly interred. There's some questions about that.
Rectangular walled compound bordering a central plaza. But we can go a step further by turning to a digitally reconstructed Alamo, painstakingly created using dozens of period maps, images, sketches, plans and descriptions, giving us a unique opportunity to explore the site as it was in 1836.
Yeah, this is cool.
Starting above the fort, we see this irrigation ditch surrounding the main complex, effectively providing a trench system for the defenders, behind which are the hastily patched 2 to 3 meter high mud brick walls of the fort. To the east are horse and cattle pens, each defended by a single cannon and reinforced walls.
Yeah, understand that when we talk about this as a fort, it's really just a complex with a few well-defended places, but a lot of these places are very poorly defended. And when you're dealing with having 200 men and you're facing an army of 3, 4, 5,000, I mean, you could have 20-foot walls and probably couldn't have defended that.
Today, the most recognisable part of the remaining complex is the church, with its famous facade. Back in 1836, it was incomplete, with no roof, leaving it exposed to the elements. Instead of a sanctuary, it was made into a fortified gun position, with a wooden ramp leading to a battery of 12-pounders facing eastwards. Outside its main western door, we find the Alamo Fort Plaza. Immediately to the left is a further gun and wooden palisade, outside which and protecting its approaches is a thorny abatis. Within the main courtyard and on the southern walls are several buildings, used at the time for a kitchen, guardroom and officers' quarters. Outside the guardroom and protecting the main southern gate is this earth and timber lunette, housing 2 more guns and a sally port on its western face. In the heart of the central plaza and facing south to protect the main gate, we find a ramp and gun position with their 9-pounders, adding further firepower to the large 18-pound gun on a raised platform in the fort's southwest corner.
So really, I mean, this being the main gate, this is the most heavily defended piece of the Alamo. It's got the thickest walls, kind of. I mean, it's got buildings right there. It's got this lunette coming out. It's got more guns on the inside.
Running away from here, some 460 feet, is the western wall, which includes the artillery command post, several more field pieces, and the Alamo's headquarters, where some of the most famous words in American history were written by guttering candlelight.
Victory or death.
On the far side of the plaza, we see a series of buildings making up the inner east wall, including the Long Barracks, jail, and just here the convent, which would become the hospital and refuge for non-combatants.
And if you think about that, that's, again, if you're looking at this, this is ideal. It's in the center. These are really the only indoor structures that are not on the outside and therefore vulnerable.
Finally, there's the north wall, and the most vulnerable point of the fort. In 1836, it was in disrepair, with gaps and areas that had been hastily reinforced with timber and earth.
Give it to Davy Crockett.
Along with ramp and several gun positions, installed in attempts to bolster its defences. Ultimately, and despite its size, the Alamo was poorly equipped for a prolonged siege, with limited supplies and inadequate fortifications. Whilst the Texians, Anglo settlers, and Tejanos, Hispanic Texans, now occupied San Antonio and the Alamo, Mexico's president, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, had started marching north with an army at his back. His mission? Crush the Texian rebels once and for all. By February 1836, Santa Anna had crossed the Rio Grande at the head of a force of around 6,000 men, hauling 12 cannon, determined to avenge earlier defeats like the loss at Bejar.
And now the problem for the Texians, for the Army of Texas, whether it's Texians or Tejanos or whoever, is that, first of all, they don't have a professional army like Santa Anna does. They're spread out. They've got all these different groups. You got 20 men in this group and 30 in this. They're spread out all over these various garrisons, and they don't have a centralized command structure. They don't have one man in charge of the army. This is something that the Americans in the Independence War in 1775 learned very quickly, which is why they appoint George Washington to take command of these various militias and turn it into a continental army. And eventually you're going to have Sam Houston do that, but it doesn't happen in time for the Alamo.
At first glance, his army looked formidable, but closer inspection revealed poorly trained, underpaid conscripts led by gaudily dressed and often inexperienced officers. And in terrible weather, with bad logistics, the northward advance became grueling and costly. Waiting for them behind the crumbling walls of the Alamo were less than 200 Texian rebels and 18 cannon. Leading them was William Barrett Travis, a 26-year-old lieutenant colonel and former lawyer from South Carolina.
And Travis is one of those guys who comes because he needs to kind of start over again. And he's got a slave with him who's going to become one of the eyewitnesses to all of this. And Travis is nominally in command of the Alamo, but there's actually two forces there, and Jim Bowie's in command of one of them. And they've got conflicting ideas about what to do. Travis wants to stay and fight and hold the Alamo. Bowie's there to get the cannons and get out. And kind of withdraw from the approaching Santa Anna and his army.
On the 3rd of February, he arrived at the Alamo with 18 regulars, joining Jim Bowie and his 30 volunteers who had arrived 2 weeks earlier. When Travis asserted command of the fort, Bowie protested, but a compromise was reached. Bowie commanded the volunteers, Travis the regulars. 5 days later, Davy Crockett arrived with his band of Tennessee volunteers, howling and cheering as they rode through the south gate, dressed as outlandishly as he was. The energy of these three men transformed what should have been a hopeless situation. Bowie gathered intelligence on the approaching Mexican forces. Travis strengthened the fortifications and drilled the men, while Crockett kept morale high with tales around the campfire. Right. Weeks of speculation and false reports ended just after 1 p.m. on the 23rd of February, when the San Fernando church bell clanged out the warning every ear had been waiting for. The lookout shouted down to the plaza, "The enemy are in view." Defenders rushed their women and children into the garrison. Men herded livestock into the corral on the east side of the fort and took up their pre-arranged positions around the Alamo's perimeter. Inside his quarters, Travis wrote one of the most famous letters in Texian history. "The enemy in large force is in sight. We have 150 men and are determined to defend the Alamo to the last. Give us assistance." At first he addressed this to the nearest Texian leader, a judge in Gonzales. Then, his dramatic instinct taking over, crossed this out and wrote instead to any inhabitants of Texas. By early afternoon, Santa Anna's vanguard approached from the west and began encircling the fort. A red flag snapped above the nearby church, its meaning unmistakable. No quarter, no surrender, no mercy.
Yeah, I mean, he basically viewed them as pirates, as rebels, as deserving of death. You know, so if you surrender at discretion, which means I could spare you, I could execute you. And as we see Santa Anna in other situations, like the folks at Goliad, he is perfectly willing to wipe out 300-400 people in one go, if that's what it takes.
Travis' reply, one which caused something of a rift with Bowie, who had wanted to seek terms, was equally clear. A single defiant boom from the fort's 18-pounder. No surrender. The siege had begun. Over the next 24 hours, more Mexican troops arrived, swelling the attacking force to 2,100 as they began digging siege works. Santa Anna took quarters in the town and emplaced his guns, readying for the bombardment. Identifying exact locations in modern San Antonio is difficult, but by overlaying this detailed map of the period onto a satellite view, we can see where those guns were initially positioned. You
see the sign there where it's written where bodies were burned. You can actually go and locate that spot today where that happened. It's right on, there's like a bridge that I think that goes over the river there, and there's some markers on either end of the bridge.
From 300 to 1,000 yards from the fort's walls. It wasn't all smooth sailing for the Mexican commander, though. He had hoped to invest the fort with a proper siege train and large caliber siege guns, but they were still several weeks away, and so his smaller cannon at closer ranges were often at risk from Crockett's rifle-armed sharpshooters. One major advantage the besiegers did have, though, was in stores. They had plenty of powder and round shot, meaning they could hammer away at leisure, whilst the defenders had to carefully husband each cannonball. Before long, the first iron round shot hurtled towards the fort, smashing into walls and sending dust and debris raining down. Inside, defenders huddled at their posts. Alma Dickinson, commander of the artillery, stood atop the church roof, worrying about his wife and baby daughter below.
And Susanna Dickinson's going to be another one of those eyewitnesses who survives this, and is going to be able to tell us some of what happened. There were people on the defenders' side who survived it, not people who were actually fighting, but family members, and of course the slave of of William Barrett Travis, and so they're able to at least give us some details about what happened.
Crockett and his Tennessee volunteers crouched behind the wooden palisade, and women and children sought shelter amongst the crates and sacks in the dark rooms of the convent as the thump of gunfire echoed overhead. During the relentless bombardment, Bowie, already seriously ill, collapsed and had to relinquish full command to Travis. Alamo Law says he was carried to a room on the fort's southern side, drifting in and out of consciousness for days. Amid the chaos, Travis penned his most famous message on February the 24th. To the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, I am besieged by 1,000 or more of the Mexicans under Santa Anna. I have sustained a continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man.
I just want to pause and say the fact that we have this letter, I mean, this is one of the all-time iconic pieces of history that we actually have, is that he was able to get this letter out. And then this is the one that he signs victory or death, which is not a new thing, right? I mean, this was what George Washington wrote on a piece of paper and became the call sign for his attack on Trenton on Christmas 1776. So who knows if maybe Travis was thinking of that or if he was just kind of thinking that on his own. But the guy had guts. I'll give him that.
I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character to come to our aid with all dispatch. Victory or death.
Notice how he appeals twice to Americans, right? He definitely identifies himself as an American. They're American settlers who want to turn this into America. And of course, that's the ultimate goal, is that they're going to break Texas from Mexico and eventually become part of the United States.
He handed it to Albert Martin, who snuck through the Mexican lines to Gonzales, where he delivered the most famous of messages before returning to the Alamo, slipping back into the fort to fight and die with his comrades. For 13 days, the defenders endured. Mexican artillery pounded the walls day and night as the besiegers' numbers continued to grow. Sleep was scarce, sometimes only minutes at a time, as Santa Anna staged nightly demonstrations to exhaust the defenders. Right. Mexican siege works crept forward, only for Texians to sally out and burn down the buildings, offering them cover for their trench works.
And this, again, in the movie's not perfect and it wasn't real popular, the movie that came out about 20 years ago, but they do show a lot of these things. They show Travis firing the single cannon shot to answer Santa Anna saying there'd be no quarter while Bowie is trying to negotiate. They show them sallying out and burning those structures so that there's nowhere for them to hide as they get closer. And they do show the nightly bombardment and then Santa Anna letting up on that before the attack so they'd all fall asleep.
Despite their courage, food and ammunition dwindled. Every day, defenders scanned the horizon, hoping for Colonel Fanning's 350 men from Goliad or Sam Houston's army.
And Colonel Fanning's 350 men from Goliad are going to be wiped out themselves.
Neither would arrive. There was a brief reprieve at 3 a.m. on the 1st of March when 32 volunteers from Gonzales broke through the Mexican encirclement and joined the defenders, bringing their number to about 200.
Imagine being these guys who break in, and you're probably thinking that you're one of like 5 or 10 groups of 30 people that have showed up and bolstered their numbers, and then you find out you're the only ones who came, and now you're encircled too.
It's roughly 3,100. Late on the 5th of March, Travis likely gathered the men in the plaza. Sensing that Santa Anna would attack at dawn, he gave anyone wishing to leave the final chance. Legend has it he drew a line in the dust with his sword. Those who crossed would fight, those who stayed could leave.
And why does he say legend has it? Because even though we have eyewitnesses, sometimes those eyewitness accounts conflict, and sometimes the accounts of what the defenders inside, the people who survived, say conflicts with what the Mexican attackers say, particularly when it comes to the fate of Davy Crockett, which I'm sure they'll get to.
Apparently only one man, reportedly a French Napoleonic War veteran named Louis Rose, did not cross. Whatever the truth of that famous moment, for the remaining defenders of the garrison, it would be a fight to the death. Travis' estimation was right, and before dawn on the 6th of March 1836, the assault began. Shouts of Viva Santa Ana rang out, and according to Texian accounts, the bugle's call, El Tejuelo, the throat-cutting song, played repeatedly, signalling that mercy would be given to none. Mexican infantry advanced from all sides, ladders raised, pikes and crowbars ready, bayonets glinting in the pale light.
And again, happening in the dark, not in the broad daylight like this, which makes sense. If you are Santa Anna, you want to give yourself the cover, you want to come when they least expect it, you want to sneak up on them.
4 columns struck the Alamo simultaneously, northwest, northeast, east and south, while Santa Anna held a reserve in the north, ready to commit them where needed.
And this is smart too, right? You've got the numbers. The last thing you want to do is allow them to defend where the attack's coming from, so you attack everywhere at once.
The main assault was here against the north wall by 700 men, led by Santa Anna's brother-in-law, General Cos, the very man who had lost the Alamo the previous December. Screaming "Arriba!", Cos had hurled his men forward. The first wave attacking in column faltered under heavy Texian gunfire, which blazed out from the wooden catwalk behind the north wall, but more pressed on. Muskets glowed from constant reloading, hands blistered, defenders fought desperately. At the north battery, Travis fired his shotgun into the attackers, shouting, "Hurrah, my boys!" Seconds later, struck by a musket ball, he fell dead.
Yeah, it's kind of anticlimactic when you think about the commander of the Alamo being one of the very first people to die, but that's what happened.
Almost in revenge for their lost commander, the guns of the northern wall fired canister shot into the packed ranks of the Mexican Aldama battalion, perhaps killing dozens of men, and another blast killed or maimed half a company of the Tolucas. The first wave was beaten back, and the second. Then in the chaos of the third assault, battalions veered and mingled and swarmed together at the weak north wall. For 15 minutes the Mexicans were at the mercy of the accurate Texian rifle fire, and their scaling ladders had all been lost or trampled. Then, exploiting the rough carpentry of the hastily patched defences, men started to climb. General Cos also wheeled his men to attack on the western flank of the Alamo, where they could climb and squeeze through embrasures. Suddenly, they were in.
And you notice where they didn't attack. The strongest point, the point that's best defended. They attacked pretty much everywhere else. And in this final attack, they're also not hitting here, which is where Davy Crockett's defending, which is what in part leads to some accounts that say that he actually survived the attack and was captured alive.
Alma and Dickinson ran to the church where his wife sat, clutching their 15-month-old daughter. "Great God, Sue, the Mexicans are inside our walls. If they spare you, save my child." Then he returned to his guns, never to see his family again. The Mexicans
There's a statue of Susanna Dickinson inside the complex there.
Poured into the plaza and the buildings around it. As a wave of attackers poured over the north wall, Colonel Morales' men regrouped at the southwestern corner and climbed the barbette before pouncing on the crew of the 18-pound gun, bayoneting them and taking the southwest corner of the fort before assaulting the main gate from the rear. The defenders, forced into the tenuous shelter of the compound's buildings, fought hand to hand and room to room. Bowie, legend says, lying bedridden in this room, emptied his pistols into the attackers before drawing his knife. But the soldiers overwhelmed his lonely redoubt, shooting and bayoneting the great fighter to death. Near the north wall, the men from Gonzales calmly withdrew, firing in pairs back to the long barrack, the interior of which had been prepared with fallback positions.
Yep.
They were cornered and outnumbered, but they would sell their lives dearly, giving ground inch by inch.
And that's a line that's directly given to the character of Travis in the movie, where he says, "Then we will sell our lives dearly."
Mexican dead and wounded started piling outside in the plaza as bullets spat from loopholes. Then Mexican officers gripped the situation and turned the Texans' own artillery pieces on the defenders, blasting open the doors and walls. This was followed by a musket volley and then a blood-curdling scream as the attackers charged in with bayonets and finished anyone still alive. Having been pushed back from the palisade, what was left of Crockett's party, according to one account, made their own last stand before the church.
Yep.
Smoke filled the air, thick as fog, and when it had cleared, so the story goes, the supine form of Davy Crockett was left a mass of coonskin, moccasin, and blood.
So, yeah, we don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're going to cover the fact that there are conflicting accounts, but what we can be fairly certain of is that Davy Crockett is one of the last men alive, which just adds to the legend, right? He's in this little band that is defending what initially was a very weak position, but ends up being the spot that's last, that hasn't been overrun yet, and then is either captured and executed or is killed fighting.
Immortalized in history. As the defenders' situation became helpless, several men, perhaps even several groups, leapt the walls and made for the open country. Accounts suggest that the quartermaster was one, but the Dolores cavalry was waiting. Sweeping down on the scene, they killed them to a man.
Yep.
In less than 90 minutes, every defender of the Alamo was dead, killed in the fighting or butchered afterwards. Only 20 non-combatants survived. These were women, children, and Colonel Travis' enslaved man named Joe. It's through their testimony that the actions inside the Alamo are remembered, and they don't always agree.
Yeah.
For instance, Susanna Dickerson, wife, now widow, to Almiron, the artillery commander, survived with her daughter and said she saw Crockett's body lying amid a pile of the dead outside the chapel. A Mexican officer, however, insisted that Crockett and some of the other defenders were initially captured alive before being summarily executed on Santa Anna's orders.
Right.
What truly happened in those final moments we'll likely never know.
Now, is it possible that they're both right? You know, by the time she comes out, maybe Crockett has been executed, and maybe his body is laying there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that their accounts conflict. But you expect to have this happen. Eyewitness accounts do typically conflict. If everybody is in absolute agreement, there's a decent chance they're making it up.
Once the dust had settled, Santa Anna's troops scoured the mission, gathering and looting the bodies. Nearly 200 men, Travis, Bowie, Crockett, Dickerson, and all the rest, were eventually burned on the great funeral pyres outside the walls.
Yep.
But their sacrifice was not forgotten. Word of the Alamo's fall spread across Texas and into America. Horror turned to fury. Volunteers poured in from every direction. Farmers leaving fields, blacksmiths abandoning forges. In April, Sam Houston's army confronted Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto.
And it didn't quite go down like that where everybody kind of came and met, right? Sam Houston, actually, it was way over this way, and they do what's called the runaway scrape, where Houston is falling back. It's a Fabian strategy, right? Fall back. Let Santa Anna get spread out, trying to catch up to you. And then when the opportunity presents itself, turn and attack. And San Jacinto is an absolute debacle for Santa Anna. I mean, the Texans barely lose a man, and they just inflict devastating losses on Santa Anna's army. And they capture Santa Anna, and in return for his life, he signs away Texas.
900 Texans charged a much larger Mexican force and won in just 18 minutes. Their battle cry echoing through history.
Remember the Alamo.
Remember the Alamo.
Remember Goliad. We
Thanks
forget
for watching.
that part.
And
People don't typically talk about the Remember Goliad part because Goliad surrendered and then they were all executed. So it's not as sexy a story as the Alamo. But yeah, there were even more people that died from Goliad. But fascinating time in history. And of course, this leads directly to the Mexican-American War a decade later as Texas becomes part of the United States. And then, of course, it's going to, another decade and a half after that, become part of the Confederate States. So fascinating time. But let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below. Definitely check out Battle Guide. They do a lot of videos like that where they overlay what happened on the modern map, which really allows you to see where things happen today. So if you ever want to go there, you have a really good idea of what you're looking at and where. So it's pretty cool, I think. Thanks for watching.